Hi, today I'm going to start a little series about how to plot stuff with ggplot2. And first, a little disclaimer, okay? The object of the series on ggplot2 is not to learn it top to bottom because it's a huge subject and it's quite complex and there are books and books on it. But usually you just want to plot stuff and plot them quickly. And what I'd like to do here is give you a just quick reference of how to do plots that you're used to doing in Excel using Excel instincts, okay? And so I'm using a very specific approach here, which is kind of reminiscent of what you do in pivot charts. And I'll illustrate what I mean when we start. So let's have a look. That's my working directory. I'm going to load a couple of libraries here. If you don't already have them installed, then install them first. Let's read in the data frame from my Dropbox link. Okay, this is the Superstore data frame, so you just have a bunch of order IDs and their priorities, quantities, and sales and whatnot. Let's write it to the local directory and open it up. All right, so what's going to happen in Excel if I take this order priority column and I try to insert a bar chart? Nothing very good, right? It doesn't know what to do with this categorical data. If I want to count or sum or do whatever, I first need to reshape the data in Excel. So of course I would do something like inserting a pivot table, taking my order priority and using the count, I can now plot it. Very nice. Now technically R is not like that. Okay, I can go to R, and I'm not going to explain exactly what's going on here, but I'm going to tell it to go to the data frame and just take on the X axis, just take the order priority and run a bar chart. And that's actually going to work. Okay, that's going to do what Excel cannot do. Okay, but now I want it to do the same thing, but on the y-axis I want it to plot the sum of sales, and that will not work, and it's going to throw an error here. And you can solve that by adding the stat equals identity, which tells it to, okay, don't try to count it, but instead go and use the actual sales data. But it's very, very confusing, and I'd rather first reshape the data the same way that we would do it in Excel. Just throw it into a nice little pivot table and plot the pivot table. Okay. So if you haven't seen or you don't know how to reshape data using dplyr into little pivot tables, I highly recommend that you see the videos on that. So now let's start and see what we're actually going to do here. Okay. So the first thing when you're going to chart a bar plot or a column plot is you need to have your categorical data as factors. So either make sure they are factors or coerce them into factors using the as factor function. So in this case, order priority, which is what we're after, is already a factor, okay, of 5 levels: critical, high, medium, blah, blah, blah. And we can go ahead and continue. So now I'm going to create a new little data frame. It's called df1, and I'm going to take the df data frame. I'm going to select only order priority. I'm going to group by order priority, summarize by count. Okay, again, if you haven't seen these videos, I suggest you do so. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on here, and I don't want to explain it here. But this is the equivalent of a count function inside the pivot table, and you can arrange or not in order if you want to sort it out. Let's run that. And now we have a neat little pivot table, okay, that we can simply plot, and we don't have to worry whether this is count or sum or whatever. We're just going to use sum. Now the way ggplot2 works is you have to set the kind of basis of what data are you using, what's going to be on the x-axis, and what's going to be on the on the y-axis, and a few more items in some more complex visualizations. But those are the basic things, and then you're going to start and add some layers to it. So let's see what we got here. And actually, I'm going to copy that. And let's do it first without the reordering. I'll show you what happens. Okay, so what do we have here? We're telling it we're going to create a plot object. That's the P here. Okay, and I'm going to use the ggplot function, and I'm going to tell it the data I want to use is df1, the data frame, the little pivot table that we created. And then I want the aesthetics of the graph. I want the x factor to be order priority. On the y-axis, I want the total orders. Remember, that's the count of orders that we had in the pivot table. And also, because I want them to be the colors to be filled in different colors to each category its own color, then I'm also going to say filled by order priority. Having defined what's going to be the basis of the chart, I have to actually add the what geometry I want the chart to have. So in this case, a geom bar. Okay, so I'm saying give me the plot basis plus the geometry of the bar. And again, always leave in this method that I'm using with the first reshaping the data, always leave it stat equals identity. It'll work. So when I run this, I now get the same graph as before, only it's nice and colorful. And if you change this, for example, to, let's say, red or any kind of hexadecimal color, VGA. Sorry about that. So now let's redefine P and run the chart. And now they're all just going to be red, okay? Now, by default, it's not going to sort the data out for you. So if you want to sort, then you'll need to use the reorder function. So X, instead of just being order priority, it's going to be the reordered order priority, and we order it on the actual sum, or the count in this case. The sum here is actually the count of items, if you recall. So if I run this, and create the graph, the new chart is going to go from low to high, and I want it the other way around, so just by minus total orders, redefine that again, and this is basically what we wanted to achieve. So now let's go and add the most necessary layers that you might want to use, say 90% of the time, and I think really this will cover most of your needs. Okay, so width 0.5, these are very wide. These are by default, I think, 0.9, so between 0 and 9 width, and 1 width, so 0.5, let's run that. Color is going to be, when in this case, color is going to be the outline color. If you want to make a little frame for the bars, the size is going to be the width of the line, and alpha is the level of opaqueness. So you can make the colors to be kind of semi see-through, semi-transparent. Let's run that. Okay, so we got thinner bars. They have a nice frame to them, and you can see through them a little bit. Theme, there are themes which basically cover the background colors, etc. So let's just use the minimal theme. It's going to be white in the background. Then I'm adding some text, so I want some labels to tell me what's in each one of these bars. And so the label is going to be the total orders. That's going to put the numbers of what's in each bar. The vertical adjustment and the size of the labels, and you can play with that. If you put just 10, for example, it's going to shoot it lower. Whatever looks good. Legend position, I like it on the right. You can change it to left. Okay, doesn't really matter. Then you have this not very nice labels for the axes. So let's put in the axis as order priority on the x-axis, total orders on the y-axis. Let's give it a title. Okay, so total orders by priority, and a little caption on the right hand side which says just 2016 data, whatever. Run that. Okay, and this is starting to look decent. Now this is a neat little one, coordinate flip. If you want to make this into a horizontal bar chart instead of a vertical column chart, you can do that. And last but not least, if you only want to do something of the equivalent of, let's say, a slicer here, not really, but it's not dynamic, but let's say I only want to see a filter or a slicer, you can do that as well. By using a vector of only the items that you want to keep with the limits on the scale x discrete function. And if you run that, then we're only left with these three categories. I really recommend that you download the code and just run this in your console and play with it. You'll just feel it a lot better. Now let's do the same, but instead of counting how many items I have in each category, I want to sum the sales, okay, the US dollar sales. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to reshape the data, only this time instead of selecting order priority, we also select sales. We group by order priority and summarize the sales, the sum of sales in a new column, which is going to be the sum orders. Okay, let's run that and have a look at DF2. So that's our little pivot table now with the sum of sales in the sum orders column. And now I'm going to define a plot2 object, which is again the same thing as before, only instead of total orders, it's going to be the sum of orders. And I'm going to run the same thing, only without the coordinate. Let's run it all the way up here without the coordinate flip. So pretty good. You can play again. There's just lots and lots of options. Instead of V-just, let's make it horizontal just. So, and let's give it an angle, let's say of 90 degrees. That's going to make those ugly labels look a little bit better. But if you just want to quickly plot stuff, you don't really need all this. And you can play with this just for positioning. Now it's disappeared. 2 seems to do the trick. That's a pretty nice positioning. Okay, so you get the gist of it. The method here is, and this is just the basic bar charts. I'm gonna the next video I'll show you how to do a stacked one, side by side ones, multiple layers of having more than one category on the x-axis, etc., etc. But this is the basic, and I really suggest that you download the code and play around with it, and just use this template. It'll work. and save you a lot of time running through endless Stack Overflow solutions to how to do this and how to do that. I think this will cover your probably 90-95% of your needs when dealing with bar charts.